You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. So a lot happened in the last couple of days, and one of the big things that happened was Chris Getz talked on a podcast. And I want to say it was Dave Kaplan, who's been on this show before, Ryan McGuffrey, who has not. But what I noticed from it, and I don't want to do a review of another podcast, and I didn't even get through the whole thing because I don't listen to... There's a reason we're a 30-minute podcast, because I can't sit around for an hour and listen to something. But I did skip around. I did read the Cliff Notes. I did learn as much as I possibly could. I probably will go back and finish it at some point. But what I learned was that our impression of Chris Getz has been dead on.
Right.
I mean, my belief that Chris Getz is trying to change everything behind the scenes, the fact that he was handed just basically a crap sandwich, that there was no infrastructure, and he had no problem pointing out that the guys that were in charge before him were bad at their job and spinning their wheels and not doing things right. And his understanding that he's not going to win right away, but what he's going to actually do is he's going to start from the ground up and he's going to build the infrastructure that should have been there for the last 20 years. And that's what he's been doing. He's been working on the international scouting. He's been changing out all these departments' work. He made everybody sit down and basically say what works, what doesn't work, what needs to be changed. He went to Jerry, asked for extra money. He went out of the organization and paid guys who were good at their jobs the right salary to be able to lure them to Chicago. And he's trying to set up something different here because, as he basically says, this organization was a clown show and nothing was set up the right way. And there's no way, like, you can't have, this is one of the greatest things that he said in there, you can't just have a couple of guys up at the top of your organization that you need to all perform at a high level and never get hurt. That's the Kenny Williams way.
Right? Yeah, get him to the majors, and then we're set. You know, we got Yoan Moncada, we're set at third base or second base for the rest of our lives.
He basically points out everything we've complained about as fans. And then he goes, this is what I'm trying to change. Like, I have to change this. Now, the other thing that he points out that I think is really interesting is that he says, you know, in the Red Sox deal, he's like, well, we weren't necessarily looking for people that would be ready, for players that would be ready early. We just happened to get that. I don't know if that's gamesmanship or not, because if you look at all of his trades, he really is getting guys that are far closer to the majors than guys that are the highest possible ceiling. He says he's going for the highest possible ceiling. He just happened to end up with these guys. I don't know if that's gamesmanship or not, because if you look at his actual trades, he really does lean towards trying to get this accelerated as much as possible. I mean, Drew Thorpe was the big get in his trade for Cease, and he's already up at the major league level. And so, you know, Kyle Teal, we're probably going to see him this year. Chase Meidroth, who I've been calling Meidroth until
you and I have both been calling this guy Meidroth. That's how it's
spelled.
Yes,
that's how it's spelled. Chase Meidroth, the minor leaguer, is not even on the 40-man roster. He gushed about him, and so our assumption that this guy is kind of earmarked to be the second baseman may be 100% on after listening to what he had to say. So I come out of it saying, Sox in the Basement, Chris and Ed, you out there listening, we've all kind of been in tune because we've been paying attention to what Getz is doing. And actually, we have a pretty good understanding of what he's doing. When I sit there and say, I hope it's like this, at least right now, it sounds like that's what it's like. Now, the sad news is, it doesn't mean you're winning in 26.
No.
It does mean you're winning in 25.
No.
You might be waiting until 27 to actually be competing. I would hope it's 26. I think you're going to have a fun team in 26. I think that, but I don't know if he goes out and spends money till 27 to when he sits there and says, okay, now we're going for it. I think you're going to have like a bad year again this year, and then I think you're going to have like the kids can play year in 26. That's what I think is going to end up happening.
Well, and I think you're going to have some of that towards the end of this year too, right? Because like you mentioned, Kyle Teal, Chase Meidroth, these are guys that may not break camp with the team, but they're definitely guys that you would expect to see at some point. Edgar Caro being the same thing. And, you know, and Getz in that interview talks about how it's really important to get the catcher position right. And he wanted an embarrassment of riches at the top between Corey Lee and Edgar Caro and Kyle Teal, because you got to get that position done and done correctly. And you're going to see some of the younger guys that are down there coming up and making, we might see Hagen Smith and Noah Schultz. We might see.
Oh, I hope so.
You might see some of the minor leaguers that we've discussed that aren't going to start the season because they're going to be Austin Slaters and, Martin Perez's, who's brand new on the team. There are going to be guys like that are going to be holding down positions that may, as you get to the deadline, become guys that are flipped then for other players. And I do think that when he's sitting there saying we're not necessarily trying to get guys that are close to the majors, there probably is some gamemanship there too, because at some point he's going to be looking for talent, right? And he's going to be looking for guys that maybe are a little bit further away. But I do honestly think that he understands. I do think he understands that this team is hard to watch, and you got to put something out there for the fans. So it's got to be a balance. So it may very well be that if you see a Luis Robert Jr. moved, it may not be for guys that are close to the majors. It might be for guys that are a couple of years away, but have a much higher ceiling. Right. And I thought it was interesting too, that one of the things he talked about, for example, with Braden Montgomery, was the idea that Montgomery was a guy that they thought about drafting, and now he's got him.
That's the thing. It's a lot of things that you assumed or that you thought probably were going on that were just kind of confirmed. And so, I mean, I feel like we're almost like Getz whisperers here. I feel like so. If you sit back and you read between the lines, he's kind of telegraphing, and he has been telegraphing with his comments and the moves that he's making, exactly what he's doing. So let's take a look at some of those moves, because there were moves this week. Yeah, Martin Perez is here. Martin Perez is a very interesting player. Sometimes he's on a team that's trying to compete, and sometimes he's on a team that's like what the White Sox are, that are building. The Pirates used him in a very similar way, signing him recently in the last couple of years to do the exact same thing that he's going to do for the White Sox and be a $5 million signing, essentially, to come in and be another veteran that is likely going to be in the rotation. I'm not a huge fan of him because I hate his whip. Too many guys that get on base, going to get himself into trouble, going to give up runs. But and he used to be a big innings eater, but last couple of years, I don't know, around 150 innings is what he's not going to be one of these 200 innings guys, but he's going to be a vet in your rotation that if he has, and he's had in the last couple of years, he's had a couple of years or half seasons where all of a sudden he's extremely effective. And you have to think with the guys that are still out there, there were other names that were out there. There were lots of pitchers that were out there that probably would have taken $5 million to come play for the White Sox. To go get him, you have to think that Brian Bannister has identified, okay, this is what he's good at, this is what he's bad at. Let's bring him in and tell him to do only the good things.
Yeah, he's also a guy that spent time in Texas with Will Venable and had his best year down there. And
2022, he had a 2.89 earned run average with a 1.258 whip, and his FIP was 3.26, and he was an all-star. Like, he's funny when you look at him, because he's been pitching at the major league level since he was 21 years old. This is going to be his year 34 season. And if you look at the body of work, I mean, his career ERA is 4.44. His FIP is 4.45. Like, over all these years, his fielding independent pitching basically matches his earned run average. He is what he is.
Exactly.
There's no mystery to him, right?
No.
His walks and hits per innings pitched are 1.446 over his entire career. He puts too many guys on base. And yet somehow he's effective enough that he has been essentially a starter now for, what is it now? He's going into his 13th year in Major League Baseball. So he finds a way to be effective enough that teams are like, well, we need 5 guys out there in the rotation, and he's at least good enough to be one of those 5 guys. And that's what he's going to be this year for the White Sox.
Yeah, a 14.6 B-WAR over a 13-year career, 90 wins, 87 losses. That tells you that he's a guy that sticks around and he shows up and he does his job, and you kind of know what you're going to get every single game. And so there's something to be said about having a little bit of reliability, especially on a team that's going to be a team that has its up and downs. I mean, we can be as excited as we want about Sean Burke, for example, going into what will be his first major league season as a full-time starter, but we don't know what Sean Burke's going to give us. We don't really know what Drew Thorpe's going to give us at this point either, right? We don't know what you're going to get out of any of the young pitchers, Jonathan Cannon, Davis Martin even, who's a guy that's been around a little bit. There's something to be said about giving Will Venable a guy that he knows he'll go out there every 5 days. He'll give you a bleh start, but at least it's a bleh start you can count on. And then also because it's a really, it's a friendly contract. He's making $3.5 million this year. It was a $1.5 million buyout, $10 million mutual option for next year. He becomes trade fodder.
That's why I'm saying $5 million, because it's 3.5 plus the buyout. Because I doubt they're giving him $10 million the next year.
No, but some team might.
That clause is there if he has a great first half and he gets traded to benefit him. That's what that clause is there for. It's like, you come here, we're not going to pay you much, but you didn't really earn a lot last year with your performance. You come in and have one of your good years that kind of sit in the middle of all the years that are kind of so-so. You have one of those years, or at least those halves. You'll get traded, and sometimes those things get kicked in, that extra year that gets kicked in the trade. So I don't know how it's written. So it's interesting that that's thrown in there. It's kind of like, look, you come here, we're not going to pay you very much. And we're probably not giving you the $10 million in year 2. But we might trade you at the deadline if you have a good first half, and you might be on a contender, and then you're going to benefit financially as well because we did that. And that's a pretty good deal for Martin Perez. And you can get a good deal at Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest on exterior windows, doors, patio doors, and storm doors. Go and see them today in their big, beautiful showroom, half block east of 159th and Ridgeland at 6280 159th Street. Owners in showroom to answer any question. There's also one on site during install with all Window and Door Superstore installers. They don't farm out the work. They've been doing it that way for over 40 years in Oak Forest since 1985. All major brands are custom made, no stock items for a perfect fit. Once again, a half block east of 159th and Ridgeland, 6280 159th Street, Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest. See more at windowdooroakforest.com. Back to Perez. The one thing he brings, he's a left-handed starter in your rotation. You don't have a lot of those.
Not yet.
Right? Like not yet. I mean, you do have the big boys that we talked about in the last show that you think are coming here eventually, right? Hagen Smith and Noah Schultz. But it gave you another lefty starter that was in there, so you're not just full of righties. And so it's an interesting pickup. The way I look at it is he's a body that's consistent. I think you're right about the Venable thing. You got a new manager, and he needs to be made comfortable. Give him one of the guys in the rotation that he at least knows what the guy is. Look, Will Venable, he sat on a lot of benches. He was the heir apparent in Texas, but this is going to be the first time he's ever actually sat there and had to decide when to take a guy out of a game, and had to decide, do I give him another couple of batters? He's going to make mistakes. He's a rookie manager. He's going to make mistakes. He needs to have a learning curve. This might help him a little bit because he knows Perez, where he'll watch him and be like, well, I know him. I know he's done. And it almost kind of gives him a little bit of confidence as he's making moves in Perez's games. So then later when he's dealing with one of these other pitchers, he has a comparison. There's got to be something there with the idea of giving him comfort in this pitcher when in reality, Martin Perez, there's probably 10 or 20 guys like that are sitting out there right now that aren't really good, aren't really bad. Probably on a good team would be like the fifth starter or a swing man. And on a bad team, ends up towards the top of your rotation because he's a veteran. But that's what he is, and he's another pickup that the White Sox have made. He, a lot of moves this week. That's the thing.
We have Bobby Dalbec gets picked up from probably a guy the Red Sox are trying to trade during the Garrett Crochet trade because they've been trying to get rid of him for a couple of years. But it's another one of Chris Getz in the Dalbec situation. It's another high draft pick, high-end prospect from another organization that fizzled out, that is going to get one last shot at proving something.
With an NRI contract, with a non-roster invitee. He's got a minor league deal, but he's going to get an opportunity to try. Again, you're recognizing what kind of team you are. Go back to that, like we talked about how Getz talked this week and had a very long interview. And one of the other things that I picked up listening to him, he understands who his owner is.
Mm-hmm.
I keep saying that over and over again. You need a heartless general manager who understands who his owner is, understands how to talk to him, and understands what kind of money he's dealing with, so he operates within those parameters. How many times have I said that? So he seems to get that his owner's cheap. He seems to get that he's not going to get to be the Dodgers. He's not even going to get to be the Cubs. He's not going to get to operate as a major market team. So he has to operate like the Rays. He has to operate like how they are trying to build out in Pittsburgh. He has to operate like some of these small market teams. He has to operate like the Guardians and a lot of the teams that are inside of his own division. So the Dalbec thing makes perfect sense because that's what those teams do. And then the heartlessness is Braden Shoemake, who a year ago he acquired, and he's gone now. He's been lost off waivers to the Royals. You're out. Jacob Amaya, who was with the team for what, 6 months, maybe less? He's
another guy he traded for to try and give an opportunity to off the 40-man roster because of Josh Rojas.
Corey Julks has cleared waivers. He's been outrighted to the minor leagues. So what he's doing is these are three names: Amaya, Shoemake, and Julks. Three guys that may not have gotten enough of an opportunity, or there might have been something there, or that, and you made a minor deal to bring these guys in. All of these guys were acquired through a minor deal, right? They were all trades.
They were all trades. They were all guys that Chris Getz identified, went out, made a trade to get, and now, less than a year later, for all of them, moved on. He's done. He's seen enough. Okay, they've proven that what was going on with them at their former organizations wasn't a fluke. They may not be good enough, so he's done. But he's giving them an opportunity because he's got a team where he can do that, and that's how you catch lightning in a bottle, right? If Bobby Dalbec comes back and turns into the guy that hit, 30 home runs in his first, it was like 56 home runs in his first 133 games as a major leaguer, something like that. I mean, something ridiculous where he was just flexing the muscle. If he comes in here into the bandbox and just starts launching baseballs, even on the short side platoon at DH or something like that, you can't tell me that there's not going to be some value to that, both in immediately giving us something to cheer about and the reason for the fireworks to get set off at home, but also, again, looking at somebody else might look at Bobby Dalbec then and sit there and go, all right, you know what? In a limited situation, I see what the White Sox did to put this guy into a situation to succeed. And now I can do that too, because I really need somebody to start hitting balls over the fence so we can actually get to the playoffs and make a run.
He's such a guy that doesn't make any sense, right? Like he gets 23 games in the shortened 2020 season. He has a 959 OPS as a rookie. And then he goes out in 2021 and he gets 453 plate appearances, hits 240 with a 792 OPS, so he's near 800 on the OPS. And he hits 25 bombs. And then after that, he's a nothing. You see a guy that does that in his year 25, year 26, and he's drafted where Dalbec was drafted. And you go, oh, he's just about to hit his stride. He's going to be a 30 home run hitter in that next year. He's going to go out and be a monster. This is when guys pop, right? 27, 28, they're in their prime. Some of them hit it at 25, 26. He just disappears. The next year, 353 plate appearances, a negative B WAR, and a 652 OPS. The next year, he only plays in 21 games, and in those 21 games, a 570 OPS. He only has one home run. And then last year with Boston, again, the last 3 years, negative B WAR, below replacement level, 37 games, a 133 batting average, and an OPS of 410. What happened to Bobby Dalbec? And you have to wonder, like, what Ryan Fuller sees. But they must see something. They must want to bring him and be like, okay, let's get this straight. You got to the majors and actually did something, and then you just disappeared off the map. Like, what happened here? He's a project. Like, if he turns around, watch me start gushing about how the White Sox are getting good at developing and fixing players. But, I mean, again, nothing's guaranteed with him. There's a reason he's floating out there and somebody's able to give him a minor league deal because all these other teams looked at him and were like, yeah, we can't fix him.
Well, and what they're looking at maybe is, and again, some of these guys turn into quad A players, right? But in 2023, when he's down in Worcester, he's hitting 269. He's got a 938 OPS, 33 homers that he launches, but before he gets his call up and gets his cup of coffee back in the majors, and maybe Boston doesn't use him as much or throws him to the Wolves, whatever.
But he's like Oscar Colas, right? Like Colas is killing in the minors and he gets up here and he can't hit anything.
Yeah, and so you wonder is, okay, is there something that they see, like you said, does Ryan Fuller see something in Bobby Dalbec that sits there and he goes, okay, I have an idea of how we can do this? Or is there something that they see in him, they sit there and go, situationally, the Red Sox weren't using him correctly, right? and something in his stats, something in his swing, in his mechanics, whatever it is, they might sit there and say, okay, we feel like we can fix this guy because we also feel like he's got the right attitude and he's got the right mentality to come in and do something. And he was just pushed out because he was never going to be the third baseman there with Rafael Devers, locked in. He was never going to be the first baseman because Tristan Casas is the guy that they've wanted at first base. And, Dalbec was not that guy. And they've got way too many hitters in their outfield. So they've always had some other DH, some other options. Maybe that's what they see. We don't know. The good news is as fans, like I said, if Bobby comes in and turns back into that guy, if he comes in and is the guy that he shows in the minors and he's in a much better position or used much better here and turns into a guy that turns around and belts 33 home runs for the Chicago White Sox this year, we're going to love the guy. And if he turns into a guy that belts 15 in the first half and somebody says, I think the Sox fixed him, I'm going to take him, well, then we maybe love the guy that he got in return for him. Who knows? But it's a worthwhile gamble.
You never know what it's going to happen to him, and most likely he fizzles out and doesn't even make the team. But it's an interesting pickup. Like, what I'm more interested in this week, what excited me more this week than Martin Perez and Bobby Dalbec was getting rid of the guys that didn't work out.
Right.
Let's get back to this for just a moment because I want to make sure I make this very clear. This is a different White Sox front office. Okay, Rick Hahn and Kenny Williams could never admit a mistake, no matter who the player was.
Right.
Rick Hahn and Kenny Williams don't trade for somebody and then get rid of them less than a calendar year after they've acquired them. And you just saw three guys in Amaya and Shoemake and Julks, and they were just jettisoned. One's DFA'd. What happens to him, we'll see with Amaya. Shoemake lost off waivers to the Royals. Julks clears because nobody wants him, and he's outrighted to the minors. They just moved guys right off their 40-man roster who they gave up somebody else for. It's the idea of, I'm going to trade somebody away. And when I traded this guy away, he's gone. I'm not chasing bad money. I didn't think he worked out anymore for my team. I'm going to acquire somebody that I think might work out for my team. And then when that guy gets here, and my evaluators and my guys that are trying to build that player up and my own eyes, if I see that he isn't going to make it, I'm moving on. I'm not going to stubbornly sit there and say, I'm a genius, right? Like Kenny has admitted it. He's told us all. I could walk into a room and look at a guy and say, he's going to be great, which is amazing because if he was able to do that, think of all the championships we would have won while he was in charge of things. But that didn't happen, right? But that's what he believed. So the arrogance of the front office before Getz's front office, that prevented them from doing what I just watched happen this week, where three guys who were acquired in a deal where you had to give something up to acquire them are off the team. That to me was the biggest news of the week. All right. Even bigger than Andrew Vaughn getting $5.85 million to be a replacement level player. And the White Sox have nobody that they have to go to arbitration with. So they've already settled that. And I see the Perez signing. And it goes back to what I said. You know what? They're going to keep adding pieces. They're going to keep bringing in veterans. They're going to keep building a team because they don't want to be that bad this year. They don't want to be chasing any more records. They want to have some consistency and they want to have competition because these guys have to get past the replacement level player to become the future on this team. Nobody's getting handed anything. That said, I'm going to hand you something, the Sox Nerd, and he's brought to you by the Village of Lamont. Want to experience a downtown with real history, great eats and drinks, and green spaces filled with adventure? Visit the Village of Lamont. Shop, dine, drink, explore. Get ready for the brand new Lamont Unlocked podcast debuting in the next week or so. Everything they have going on and that podcast will be found at lamontdowntown.com. Nerd, what do you got for me?
Chris, let's take a look at left-handed pitcher Martin Perez, who is reportedly signing a one-year deal with the White Sox. This cat has a wild background with stuff that probably won't make it to the board. For instance, on June 24, 2017, Perez, then with the Texas Rangers, landed on the disabled list with a thumb injury. Perez suffered the owie when he accidentally jammed the digit in a hotel door. Following that season, Perez suffered a broken right elbow when he fell after a bull startled him while he was working on his ranch in Venezuela. After making a late spring debut in mid-March of 2018, Perez said he got revenge on the bull by having it slaughtered and then eating it. It was good meat, he explained. Perez is also a singer. He belted out the Venezuelan national anthem prior to the country's World Baseball Classic exhibition against Houston in West Palm Beach, Florida on March 8, 2023. His version of Gloria al Bravo Pueblo was pretty good. I have the link on my WordPress blog, which you can access at soxinthebasement.com. The most recent singing Sox player I can recall was pitcher Miguel Gonzalez, who crooned with a mariachi band in rehearsals on Cinco de Mayo 2018. He was good too. The best singing Sox performance was turned in by Lamar Johnson, who delivered the national anthem before hitting 2 solo home runs in a 2-1 win over Oakland on Father's Day 1977 at Comiskey Park. How about a baseball-related nugget on Perez? The 33-year-old has more experience than the Sox projected rotation right now, making him a logical candidate to start the opener. Should that happen, Perez will become the first Venezuelan to start a Sox curtain raiser on the mound. The only Venezuelan with an opening day decision for the Sox is reliever Tony Castillo at Toronto in 1997. Before I get to my zinger, I remind you can find more Sox nerd gems like these on Twitter. My zinger? The Sox also recently signed Bobby Dalbec, who once hit a unique home run. On June 20th, 23, Dalbec hit a home run that collided with a train on the tracks behind left field at AAA Worcester's Polar Field. That came 1 month and 1 day after he launched a 515-foot home run, which is the longest in the history of that park. That's it, Chris. More than you probably wanted to know about jam digits, Venezuelan ranchers, and harmonious hurlers.
We have new players coming to the SoxFest Live, which still is not sold out, even though it's in a small theater. It's just not working out for them. Harold Baines is going to be there. I expected Harold to be there, right? And I'm sure Ron Kittle will be right behind him. The 2005 pitching staff, much of it will be there. Mark Burley's going to be there only on Friday because Mark ain't doing a whole weekend. He's got hunting to do.
No, he's got other things to do.
He's got stuff to do. When they invited him, they probably had to ask him a lot. They're like, please? Could you please? What if we do this for you? Okay, fine. I can swing through, but I'm not canceling the thing I'm doing on Saturday.
Typical Mark Burley fashion. If every other player gets an hour with the fans, Mark Burley will get it done in 45 minutes.
He's going to blow through everybody real quick. All of his meet and greets, whatever he does. Jose Contreras and Freddie Garcia are going to be there as well. So I would imagine there'll be a panel with the 2005 pitching staff. And then they've added 3 current players, and I love this list. Mike Tauchman's going. Makes sense. You acquired him, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Gus Varland's going to be there.
The immortal Gus Varland.
Yeah, the guy who they did the social media thing on. Remember, we joked about this. We're like, you have to. Why isn't he not on the list? You did a great social media thing where it was asked, who is this guy? I don't even think he's real or whatever it was. And then you did a whole thing making fun of the fan tweet and introducing you to Gus Varland, who I don't even know is going to make the team. But you got to ride that. It's a funny thing, so he's going to be there. And then the name that's the most interesting to me, after we talk about all these guys that have been jettisoned this week, who are fringe players, here's a guy that I'm not too convinced is going to be anything other than an up and down between the majors and the minors guy. Brooks Baldwin is going to be there.
Oh,
and I find that interesting because Fangraphs list him as the probable shortstop. I don't know if I believe that. Again, I think Montgomery is going to get every opportunity. And don't forget about Rojas coming. You're really going to make him the third baseman and not even consider him at short? And then what does that do with Ramos? And what does that do with Miguel Vargas? It's going to be a very interesting competition. We talked about this, the open competition, especially for these infield positions and designated hitter and who's going to actually win out. There are way too many infielders. There are way too many guys vying for first, second, third, and short. The list is long. Not all of them are making the team. Not all of them are going to be starters. And a lot of them are showing up at SoxFest Live. There are more infielders showing up at SoxFest Live than there are spots in the 26-man roster for them. So it's like they're running them out there like, hey, look at all these guys. I don't think all these guys are going to be on the team when they break camp.
Is it entirely possible that the White Sox, the 2025 White Sox, are going to be the first team in Major League history to settle position battles ahead of spring training by like Jello wrestling at a fan fest?
That's what will get me to buy tickets. Some sort of like medieval times jousting going on there between Mygroth and Brooks Baldwin. Right? Yeah. Vargas and Ramos go up against each other. Like, yeah, like give me something like that. Like an American Gladiator competition to try to make it onto the team. Give me something like that, and maybe I'll buy tickets to your fest.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on soxinthebasement.com.